People sometimes ask me, why am I a vegetarian? They say, do you not like the taste of meat? Or do you just like animals? As if liking animals enough not to want to see them dead was somehow weird. As for the taste, we're genetically programmed to like the taste of certain things, like fat, and probably meat too. I suspect if you was ask an honest veggie whether he liked the taste of sausages, he'd have to say yes. And that's why they make veggie food that tastes and look like meat. So why don't I eat meat? Well, just because you like something doesn't mean to say you should do it. It's the same with anything in life. Liking it isn't enough of a reason to keep doing it. Otherwise we'd spend all of our time sitting around wanking and eating cake. So what's so bad about eating meat? Well, for one thing, the environmental damage that raising livestock causes is horrific. From ripping up rainforests for grazing or for growing food for cattle, to the vast amounts of water needed and the huge quantity of methane they produce, cows being the worst offenders. The meat industry is unsustainable. And of course there's a small issue of the sheer unparalleled cruelty that your dinner has to go through. Being born into bondage, spending its entire life in a box no bigger than itself, and then fed into the death machine to have its throat cut. There are lots of examples of this cruelty, but I won't go through them now because this isn't a crusade, it's just me sharing my opinions. When I've said these things to people in the past, they've tried to come up with some excuses for eating meat. Like, you need meat in your diet, veggies just aren't enough. To which I like to reply, I didn't realise you were a dietitian. Because if they were, they'd probably know that there's nothing you can't get from meat that you can't get from a balanced diet of fruit and vegetables. One of the most annoying excuses I get thrown at me by meat eaters is, nature is red and tooth and claw. What an old great chestnut that is. Or in other words, animals eat each other, so why don't we? What a lot of nonsense. Animals lick their own asses too, but we don't do that. To suggest we eat meat because animals do is like saying we're no more than animals ourselves. Animals eat meat because an instinct tells them to, because they're carnivores and they need meat. Or if they are omnivores, they can't get enough protein from vegetables alone. But we humans can. We eat meat because we choose to. And this choice is what separates us from the animals. So, given the choice, wouldn't it be better to choose not to inflict suffering on others? We humans tend to think of ourselves as more than just animals. And whether you believe in God or creation or all that stuff, or whether you just think it's a lot of bollocks, we still try to elevate ourselves above the rest of the animal kingdom. And as the most intelligent species, it's our right to do so. But this comes with great responsibility to protect the world and everything in it, not just exploit it for our own sense of gratification or greed. To ignore this responsibility is to say I'm no better than an animal. We call ourselves human and separate ourselves from animals because we have this intelligence and the responsibility. So to shirk this responsibility and rely on our instinct, which says I want meat, and ignore the consequences and the suffering it causes, just so that you can scoff a corpse, is to relinquish your humanity, and is no better than resigning yourself to wallowing in shit like a pig. No decent person would go around hurting weaker people than themselves just for your own enjoyment. Nor do we kick babies. So why do we gain so much pleasure from the suffering and death of animals? If we see a dog or a cat in the street, we don't kick it in the face or shoot it. Well, most of us don't anyway. And why? Because we have compassion. So why no compassion for other animals? One of the problems, as I see it, is that most people are so far removed from where their food comes from that they don't associate meat with the real business of death. Slaughterhouses, hanging cow corpses, pools of blood, and the stench of guts. No, for most people, meat is simply something you buy wrapped in plastic from the supermarket, along with your low-fat yogurts and cream cakes. And the supermarkets are responsible for making this disassociation even more profound. At least when there were real butchers, you could see dead pigs hanging up, and it gave us self-righteous types someone to point the finger at. If most meat eaters had to kill and prepare their own meat, most of them would become a vegetarian overnight. And speaking as someone who, in my youth, used to kill and prepare his own meat, I know how unpleasant it can be, especially the first time. And there's nothing quite like the smell of fresh guts to put you off your dinner.